What's coming off around here?
If you guys playing railroad anymore today, there's a landslide, a new cut.
Well, at the introduction of my channel, I have created that lead-in with the clip from the movie Danger Lights, and the actor who wants to know if we're playing a railroad, that was Louis Woolheim, and the film was made back in 1930. And yeah, Mr. Woolheim is quite the thuggish looking lad. He's the ideal superintendent for a railroad. But actually, I kind of enjoy his get the job done kind of approach to everything in the movie. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that movie, but it's an interesting movie. You can find it online if you like. I'll put a link to where you can find it in my comments section. So it's important to me that I hopefully present you with something that is both entertaining and interesting. And I do have a plan to for the channel that I will present several projects, both planned and ongoing. I've been doing some developmental work with the DCC protocols, just because it's one of the things I enjoy. And again, it goes to the word stuff in the HO scale stuff of the title. So, hopefully you'll find this interesting and stick around for a while. Because this is an introduction video and I'm brand new to the YouTube experience, I thought a small introduction would be appropriate. So I'd like to just give you a brief survey of my history with model railroading and railroads in general, just where did the interest come from. So it was while I was a child that my interest in trains began. It was a nearby railroad track that was the Lehigh Valley Railroad main line. And that was a location where I would occasion on my bicycle. My parents' home was actually quite close, so it wasn't a huge ride, but I think it would take me approximately 5 minutes from start to finish to get to it. And I was amazed quite frequently by the locomotives passing. But I often heard the sounds of the locomotives and I just ignored it. But it was the sound, it was that woeful wail of a steam locomotive that really drew me to the tracks. And I would pedal madly down to the tracks in order to hopefully catch a sight of the passing steam train. But that fairly quickly came to an end. Directly opposite the track was a massive scrap yard. I believe it was called Huffman Brothers. And it was just filled with all manner of scrap vehicles of every nature. And I noticed one day that they had built the fence. Well, the fence was always there. My friends and I would leap over the fence to play on the cars. But they had built a gate and laid track into the scrapyard. And I actually witnessed, after chasing the sound of a steam locomotive, that there were about 4 steam locomotives. The ones at the rear were all being towed by the one at the lead, and it backed them all into the scrapyard. And over several days of my checking back, I noticed that they scrapped them. They cut them up. The boiler lagging would come off, and it would spill asbestos all over the ground. And there's these piles of white material, looked like snow. My friends and I, we would play on those locomotives while they were still in the process of being scrapped. We'd crawl in them in the evening when the scrappers had gone home, and it was just overwhelming to see in the cab, all of the valves and pipes that were poking out of the boiler front. Sometime later in my youth, I had my father bought me a Lionel train that was a small circle track on a folding table. And so I had fun with that for a good period of time. Sometime later in my youth, I acquired a paper route from my uncle, and I was actually earning some money by tips from my folks on my paper route, and I used that money to go to a hobby shop that was just off my route and buy train magazines. So the train magazines I initially was buying were, all about the fallen flags, and I started then getting interested in also modeling, and that was my basic interest was to model cars and boats and airplanes, and so I was buying these kits and building them. But the model railroad became more of a focus because, along with buying the model car magazines, I started buying model train magazines. Well, the model train magazines were, to me, and just amazing. I just looking at some of the really beautiful detail that I was finding, that people were so skilled at creating lifelike dioramas of their train layouts, and also had great discussions about things such as train operation. If you're really gonna do a model railroad, I guess it was in my head that it would be something much larger, that would involve businesses and switches and all those glorious things that make it. One of the people, though, that interestingly enough very much interested me was one of the contributors to Model Railroader magazine. His name was Don Hanson. Don was putting articles on electronics, and I've for some reason, it just the electronics aspect of the model railroading really piqued my curiosities. I think I really would look for articles from him every time I bought another magazine from Model Railroader. The first thing I'd do is look at the table of contents to see if there was a article by Don Hanson so I could read it. And his ability to explain the electronics was extremely good. So I could always grasp what was being done and understand how to do it. But lack of space and lack of money, of course, I never did. And to this day, I still think back on Don Hanson, but not because of Model Railroader. It was because many years later, I wound up working for a company called Schneider Electric down in North Carolina. And Don Hanson was an employee there. He had transferred from Milwaukee, where he had been working for a Square D company, and Schneider Electric had purchased Square D, and they had moved the people who were willing to relocate down to North Carolina. So it was an interesting event to suddenly meet somebody that you thought so much of when you were young. Curiosity, strange things happen. Much later in my life, when I was in my late 20s, I actually took time to build a N-gauge circle track railroad on a 4x8 sheet of plywood. And I did make an effort to do some exciting things with it for my own purposes that involved a little complexity with using switches and various. I think I may have had as many as 4 locomotives. I was never really that wealthy, but I still have some of the remnants of that, believe it or not. Here's one of them. I just stuck them away, and I was digging out all of my HO scale stuff in anticipation for starting this model of a actual railroad, not a toy. And so here's some of these pieces that still exist. surprising after all these years that they're here. I mean, they're in somewhat beat up condition, but they survived. So, right, as I said, my goal now is HO stuff, HO stuff, including many things that this project or planned activities will involve into. Well, I'm creating my intro video. I had a need for something to hold the camera. And I'm using my cell phone to video the clips that I'm putting together. And this just came, I just bought this, and I was going to have it hold the camera while I'm speaking, so it's not, you don't have all this motion in the background that occurs whenever I shift my position. So the thing I'm curious about with it, though, is when you put the phone into this crazy gadget here, that's pretty tight. That's really got a grip. So you don't have to worry about the phone falling, but try and get the phone back out of it. Or the other thing that occurs is if you clamp your phone in here and you have your side buttons in the wrong position, this will shut your phone off. So, it's kind of a struggle to use it. I don't know if any of you have ever used one of these contraptions or had any other kinds of issues with it, but I think it'll work, but I'm going to have to be real patient to incorporate that into my videography. But just thought to mention it. To further the introduction video, I'd like to just describe the model railroad that I plan on building. It's not a lot of planning just yet, but I've knocked out a number of the issues that I'd like to target for building the model railroad. Most important is that it's going to be HO. The name that I contrived in my head for the railroad, that's not, locked in yet, but I believe it's going to be called the Lehigh Valley Transfer. And I have, of course, no insignia or color scheme for it yet. That'll be down the road a bit. The source I plan for services on this railroad would be an interchange with the Pennsy and Reading railroads at an interchange track. And as far as businesses, I've still unclear exactly which businesses I'm going to want to service on the short line. The bench work is going to be a kind of shelf layout. It'll be sections of 2 by 8 foot flat surfaced layouts. And they go, I guess that a lot of traditional railroads I've seen on YouTube and elsewhere have been fairly large, wide railroads. A lot of times they have a center divider or some other means of a hatch to access items on the railroad because of the sizes. But I don't really believe that's what I want. I'm pretty sure that I can put together a fairly large railroad by stringing together 2 foot wide, 8 foot long sections, and the railroad itself will remain flexible within the space that I have. I can just expand it as I see fit. And the initial section that I plan on building, first off, that we'll see more of that as things go forward. That's going to be a service area. I've studied it fairly closely, and I came up with, I'm fairly ignorant about what it takes to build a proper service area for a railroad, what it ought to look like to be most effective and realistic. But some of the information I came up with was, first of all, was this. This was Tony Koster's steam and diesel locomotive servicing terminals, and it was fairly helpful. There were things I wasn't able to glean from it, but in general, it helped me get the basics of it. And then there was the track planning for realistic operation. and that was by John Armstrong. And in fact, there was a page. Oh, shoot, get that out of the way. There it is. Okay, I think you can see that. Okay, this page was 41 in his book, showed an actual layout for a service area, which was also very helpful. In addition, I looked at various websites, quite a number in fact, and I downloaded a lot of images from there to shore up my knowledge. So here's what I believe I need for a service area. I'm going to have a coaling station with a coal bin, a sanding station with a boiler house, a sand bin, and a drying house, a water station with a tower, a tank, and a pump house, a fuel station with a tower and tank, an ash station with a pit and an ash hoist, an inspection station with a pit, of course, and lastly, an engine house. If I've missed something big, please let me know. I have plans or kits for all of these, the ones I've identified. And as I go forward building those, of course, I'll cover that on my channel. So continuing with the introduction, I want to add that I've been working this past year on two sizable projects. They're both 8-show related, but it fits into the stuff category. They're not going to be anything to do with a specific model railroad, but more about something I just simply enjoyed doing. And that first part would be the development of a throttle, and that's my throttle right there. I'll talk about it in a second, but the other part is development of a monitor, DCC monitor. More, I should call it actually a data logger, because it doesn't run continuous. It collects data and displays it for a specific amount. There's limitations of the hardware. Now the throttle, to be able to support that development, I needed to have a decoder. So I got a set of 3 of these. They're from NCE. They're called the Light-It decoder. And these are capable of controlling the LEDs. So on this development board, I have wired in 3 LEDs. There's a red, yellow, and green. And the test is to control the Light-It from the throttle. But what I do have is an NCE cab control that I'm using to create the DCC signals that are on this track, which is part of the development. And the reason for that is the second part of what I've been working on this past year. And that is this is the decoder. It does work. This is a combination, of course, just like with the throttle. This has quite a lot of developmental time in it. The DCC signal comes off of here, and it feeds into this conversion circuit. And what the conversion circuit does is it's an optocoupler, and it changes from an AC signal of the DCC to a digital signal that can be fed into the Arduino. Well, I'd like to just wrap this introduction up for now and just make a few post-video notes for you. That first off, I'm filming everything using my cell phone. I may have already made that point, but I just thought I'd add that. And I got to say, it was not trivial figuring out precisely how to get the best quality video shots using the cell phone. It just, well, it was difficult. The other thing is that the editing tools I'm using is Shotcut, and I'm brand new to Shotcut, and I'm telling you, it was quite an uphill climb getting used to it. I imagine others who are using it, or if they've already become familiar, would may have forgotten how difficult their very first use of it was. But I got to say, I wish I had a mentor to help me through that. But I did gain a lot of knowledge watching 2 videos on the introduction to Shotcut, and I tried to make good use of the tool in producing this introduction video. And I do want to say also that I hadn't really anticipated the amount of time that you have to dedicate in order to create and edit any video. I guess apparently I've heard people on the internet mention that they've invested a tremendous amount of time in editing, and I got to admit that I didn't take them that seriously. And this has been an eye opener. It's really quite difficult, and I want those out there who are making videos to know that I do appreciate your work. I mean, it's really difficult, and hopefully, going forward, once I get the better part of understanding hows and whys, the video effort won't be quite as bad. So I just wanted to close out with that and add thank you to all of you who have been producing YouTube videos, because I'm an avid watcher of YouTube videos, and I always try to be a like and subscribe kind of watcher. So hopefully someone can offer me one. But I'm looking forward to producing more and sharing some of the adventures that I'll have going forward with my railroad design and build, and especially with the kits. I'm going to be kit bashing a few of those. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you'll come back and watch another. Bye-bye.